When you've been married for 8 years, you start to think there's nothing left that could really shock you. You know your partner's habits, moods, triggers. You finish each other's sentences. Or at least, you think you do. That morning started like any other, quiet, calm, routine. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen, sunlight spilling through the curtains, the low hum of the dishwasher running in the background. I was scrolling through some work emails when she sat down across from me, holding her mug with both hands. There was something different in her face. Not sadness, not anger, just focus. "Mark," she said, carefully, "I've been thinking about something important." Now, in any marriage, those words are like an invisible alarm bell. Thinking about something important never ends with, "We should go on a trip," or, "Let's try a new restaurant." It usually means trouble. So I looked up from my phone and said, "Okay. What's on your mind?" She took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about getting my tubes untied." I froze mid-sip. For context, my wife, Laura, had 2 kids from her first marriage, both in college, both grown. When we met, she was firm, she didn't want more children. That was fine with me. I had a son from my own previous marriage, and we agreed we'd build our life around travel, peace, and freedom. So when she said that, I thought I misheard. "You're joking," I said with a laugh that didn't sound convincing. But she didn't laugh. Her face stayed calm, maybe too calm. "No, I'm serious. I've been thinking about it for a while." I set my cup down slowly. "Why? You've always said you were done with all that." She hesitated. Then, with an awkward little smile, she said the sentence that changed everything. "Actually, my ex and I were talking. He told me he regrets not having more kids. And it made me realize I might want another one too." I just stared at her, trying to understand the logic behind what I'd just heard. "You and your ex were talking?" I repeated. She nodded casually. "We ran into each other at the hospital last month. He's remarried, but we were reminiscing, you know? About when the girls were little. He said seeing them grown made him realize how much he misses that stage of life." I blinked. "And somehow that conversation led you to getting your tubes untied?" She looked a little defensive now. "It just got me thinking, Mark. I mean, I've been feeling a little lost lately. Maybe having another baby could, I don't know, bring something new into my life." "The worst part?" She said it as if it were completely normal. As if a married woman casually saying she wanted to have a baby, inspired by her ex-husband's nostalgia, was just part of an everyday conversation. I took a long breath, trying to steady my voice. "And what would that mean exactly?" I asked. "You get your tubes untied, and then what? You and I have another baby?" She looked at me then, really looked, and hesitated before saying, "I assumed you'd help raise it." Those words hit like a punch to the chest. Not we'd have a baby, not we'd try again together, but you'd help raise it. As if it wouldn't even be mine. I felt the ground tilt under me. My mind went silent. I could hear the clock ticking, the refrigerator humming, but nothing made sense anymore. She mistook my silence for agreement. "I know it sounds sudden," she continued. "But it's my body, my choice, and if it's something I want." That's when I interrupted her. "Laura, stop." She froze. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw accusations or ask questions I didn't want the answers to. I just looked at her and said softly, "Follow your heart." She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly that. Follow your heart," I said, forcing a calm tone. "If this is what you really want, I won't stand in your way." She relaxed instantly, maybe thinking I was being supportive. "That's why I love you," she said, reaching for my hand. "You always understand." But she was wrong. I didn't understand. Not anymore. Because in that moment, something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something colder. Sharper. A quiet kind of clarity that only comes when you realize the person across from you has already stopped being your partner. That night, she acted like nothing had happened. We watched a show together, ate dinner, even laughed a little. She probably thought I'd accepted her decision. Maybe she even felt relieved. But I didn't sleep. While she snored softly beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling every illusion crumble in slow motion. How many times had I ignored the signs? The secretive phone calls? The messages she said were from friends? The sudden trips to visit her daughters but never inviting me along? Now it all made sense. By morning, my mind was made up. If she wanted to follow her heart, I'd let her, but I wasn't going to stick around to fund the journey. When she woke up, she smiled and said, "You're quiet today." "Just tired," I said. Inside, I was already planning everything, meetings with my attorney, checking our accounts, locking my business assets down. She wouldn't see it coming, not until it was too late. Because sometimes, silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. And that's the last thing I remember thinking before I got up, kissed her forehead, and went to work, already halfway out of the marriage, even if she didn't know it yet. The morning after our conversation, I woke up before the alarm. Laura was still asleep beside me, breathing softly, her face relaxed. You'd never guess that just yesterday, she'd told me she wanted to undo her sterilization because her ex-husband wanted kids. I got dressed quietly, took my coffee to the living room, and opened my laptop. The decision I made last night still felt solid, no second thoughts, no hesitation. I wasn't going to argue, beg, or fight for someone who was already halfway out of our marriage emotionally. I'd just remove myself from the equation. I started with the basics. Bank accounts. Joint credit cards. Business holdings. Within an hour, I had a meeting booked with my lawyer for that afternoon. I told him to clear his schedule, I'd pay double for the urgency. At work, no one could tell anything was wrong. I cracked jokes, handled calls, even took the team out for lunch. But my mind wasn't there. Every time I glanced at my phone, I half expected a message from her saying she'd changed her mind, that it was all a mistake. But she never did. That night, she acted like nothing had happened. She cooked her usual salmon dinner, poured us both wine, asked about my day. I watched her across the table, and it hit me, this woman was living in a completely different reality. She thought she could tell her husband she wanted to have a baby with another man, and still come home to a peaceful dinner and Netflix. That's when I realized how far gone she really was. 2 days later, I met with my attorney, David, a calm, older guy with the kind of face that never changes expression no matter how big the news. When I told him what happened, he didn't even blink. So she said she's getting her tubes untied for her ex-husband? He repeated. Yep. And she expects you to raise the child? Apparently. He nodded slowly, opened a folder, and said, then let's make sure when she follows her heart, she doesn't take half your life with her. Within the next 48 hours, everything was in motion. We froze the joint accounts. Reassigned control of my business assets. Redirected income to a separate account in my name only. Legally, she couldn't touch anything. Emotionally, she still thought I was her loving, supportive husband. The irony wasn't lost on me. A week later, she came into the kitchen smiling, holding her phone. Guess what, she said. I got the appointment. The clinic confirmed it. They said recovery's quick too, maybe 2-3 days. I looked up from my coffee and forced a neutral expression. That's great. You seem excited. I am, she said, her eyes shining. I just feel hopeful again, you know? Hopeful. That word stuck with me. Hopeful for what? A new baby with another man? A second chance at a life she already threw away once? I didn't ask. I didn't argue. I smiled, kissed her forehead, and told her I'd take care of everything while she recovered. Inside, I was counting the days. The morning of her surgery was quiet. She got ready early, humming as she packed a small overnight bag. When she walked out of the bedroom, she wore that same soft blue sweater she always wore when she wanted comfort. Maybe part of her was nervous. At the door, she paused and said, "Thank you for being so understanding, Mark. You're amazing." I smiled faintly. "Follow your heart, right?" She nodded, kissed me, and left. The moment the door closed, I called David. "File it," I said simply. He didn't need to ask what I meant. By noon, the divorce petition was on record. By 2, every major asset had been frozen. By 4, I was sitting in my office, watching the world outside my window, feeling a strange mix of peace and finality. That evening, she came home groggy and pale from anesthesia. I helped her inside, settled her on the couch, brought her soup and water. She thanked me softly, said she'd probably sleep through the night. I looked at her, this woman I'd once loved so deeply, now a stranger in my house, and felt nothing. Not hate. Not anger. Just closure. 2 hours later, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at the screen. It was a text from her lawyer, received notice of divorce filing. We'll contact you tomorrow to discuss response options. I picked up the phone and placed it gently in her hand. Your lawyer texted, I said quietly. She blinked awake, confused, opened the message, and froze. Her voice trembled. Mark, what is this? It's exactly what it looks like, I said. Divorce papers. She sat up, her face draining of color. You can't be serious. I'm very serious, I said calmly. And just so you know, all shared accounts are locked. Don't bother trying to transfer or move anything. It's done. Tears welled in her eyes. Mark, please, I didn't mean, it wasn't about him. I thought maybe I cut her off gently. You thought I'd raise another man's child. That's what you thought. She didn't answer. She just cried, quietly, helplessly. I left her there. I didn't yell. I didn't throw insults. I just walked into the other room, sat down, and exhaled. For the first time in weeks, I felt free. That night, I heard her crying through the walls. I didn't go to her. I couldn't. The trust was gone, the love was gone, and the man she once had, the one who forgave everything, was gone too. By the next morning, I'd booked a hotel for a few days, packed a bag, and left a note on the counter. I meant it when I said follow your heart. But I also meant it when I said I wouldn't stand in your way. Good luck, Laura. You'll need it. When I left the house that morning, I didn't look back. Laura texted twice before noon, short, panicked messages. Mark, please answer. We can fix this. I didn't reply. By then, everything was already in motion. David, my lawyer, had predicted her reaction almost word for word. She'll cry. Then she'll try to reason. Then she'll panic when she realizes what she's lost, he said, tapping his pen against the table. And that's when you stay silent. Don't get emotional. The moment you engage, she'll use it against you. He was right. Over the next week, she went through every stage of grief, except acceptance. At first, she tried the guilt route. Long messages about how we could have worked it out, how I was throwing away years of love, how I misunderstood everything. Then came the anger. You blindsided me. You're cruel. I trusted you. But the truth was simple, she'd broken that trust long before I signed a single paper. I kept things formal. Every reply went through lawyers. Every conversation had a paper trail. She wasn't used to that. She was used to the man who always calmed her down, who compromised, who fixed things. But that man was gone. The night she told me about getting her tubes untied, she'd flipped a switch in me. And there was no turning it back on. 2 weeks after the surgery, she tried to call me from an unknown number. I didn't answer. An hour later, I got a text that made me laugh out loud. He changed his mind. She didn't have to say who. I already knew. Her ex. Apparently, once he realized she'd actually gone through with the reversal, he panicked. He was remarried. The idea of being tied to her again, with another child, must have sent him running. Poetic justice, really. She'd risked her health, her marriage, and her security for a fantasy conversation with an ex-husband who just wanted an ego boost. Now she was alone. Recovering from a surgery that symbolized everything she'd lost, and no one waiting on the other side. That same afternoon, David called. She's contesting the divorce, he said, his tone dry, almost amused. Claimed she was emotionally manipulated. She's asking for spousal support. I chuckled. She's really going for it, huh? Don't worry, he said. The prenup holds. You'll be fine. And I was fine. Financially, emotionally, even spiritually, if that's the right word. For the first time in years, my mind was quiet. No walking on eggshells. No late-night arguments about who said what. No pretending everything was fine while I slowly disappeared inside my own marriage. 3 weeks later, she showed up at my office. No appointment, no warning. My assistant buzzed me and whispered, "There's a woman here, says she's your wife." I paused. "Tell her I'm in a meeting." But Laura wasn't one to take no for an answer. She pushed past reception and walked straight into my office. She looked thinner, paler. Her eyes were red, from crying or lack of sleep, I couldn't tell. "Mark, please," she started, her voice trembling. "Just talk to me. 5 minutes." I closed my laptop and looked up at her calmly. "You shouldn't be here. I know. But I need you to understand. I wasn't planning to have a baby with him. It wasn't like that. It was just, I was confused, and when he said, 'Stop,' I said gently, raising a hand. 'You don't need to explain. I understood everything the moment you said, my ex wants kids.'" She started crying again. "I made a mistake. A huge mistake." "Yeah," I said softly. "You did." She stepped closer. "Can't we at least try counseling? You always said marriage means fighting through the hard stuff." I leaned back in my chair. "We did. For 8 years. But you weren't fighting, you were wandering." That shut her up. After a long silence, she whispered, "He doesn't even talk to me anymore." I nodded. "Then maybe you'll finally see who was on your side all along." Tears streamed down her face as she turned to leave. When the door closed behind her, I exhaled, not out of anger, but relief. It was over. That night, I sent David one last message. Proceed with settlement. No further contact outside legal channels. Within a month, everything was finalized. She got what the prenup promised, 1 car, her personal savings, and a small portion of our joint investments. She called it unfair. I called it balance. After signing the last document, David shook my hand and said, "You handled this better than most." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I just stopped handling her long ago." He smiled faintly. "Freedom looks good on you." I moved into a smaller house. Nothing fancy, just quiet. One bedroom, one office, big windows that caught the sunrise. I started cooking again, working out, meeting old friends. For the first time in years, I enjoyed my own company. Sometimes, I'd wake up and think about the old life. The dinners, the laughter, the trips. But then I'd remember that morning, the way she said, "My ex wants kids," so casually, and the peace would return. Because in the end, it wasn't about betrayal. It was about realization. I'd built a life around a woman who didn't know what she wanted. And I'd been too loyal, too patient, too trusting to see it. Now I did. That winter, I got a card in the mail. No return address. Just 2 words written in her handwriting. "I'm sorry." I folded it, placed it in a drawer, and never opened it again. Some apologies don't need to be accepted, only understood. It's strange how silence feels after years of noise. For months after the divorce, I woke up expecting chaos, an argument, a slammed door, a text that would ruin the day before it even started. But all I heard was the hum of the refrigerator and the wind brushing against the windows. It wasn't loneliness. It was peace. The kind of peace you don't notice you've been missing until it fills every corner of your life. Laura didn't contact me again, not directly. She tried through mutual friends at first, little messages slipped into conversations, "Tell him I'm sorry," or "Ask if he still thinks about me." But I didn't respond. I couldn't. The bridge had burned completely, and standing in the ashes wouldn't rebuild it. I heard about her situation a few months later, not because I wanted to, but because gossip has a way of finding you when you least care. Her ex, the man who supposedly made her rethink her life, was long gone. He'd blocked her number after his wife found out about their conversations. Laura lost her job at the clinic soon after. Apparently, her performance had been slipping for months. The surgery she'd done to reverse her sterilization caused complications. Nothing life-threatening, but painful, a constant reminder of what she'd done. She'd traded everything stable for a fleeting emotion, and now she was left with scars, both literal and invisible. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. Not exactly revenge either. It was validation. A sense that life had delivered the lesson I couldn't. You see, people like her, they don't mean to destroy. They drift. They chase feelings instead of commitments, nostalgia instead of reality. But drifting has consequences. And sometimes, by the time they realize it, the current has already taken them too far. By summer, I'd moved to a new city, smaller, quieter, close to the coast. I rented an apartment with white walls, a view of the harbor, and nothing but the essentials. No shared furniture, no reminders of the past. I'd go on long walks after work, just watching the ocean and thinking about how different life felt when it belonged entirely to me. One evening, I stopped at a small cafe by the pier. The waitress, a woman about my age, smiled when I sat down. Her name was Emma. We started talking about the weather, then books, then travel. Simple things. It wasn't love at first sight, it was comfort at first conversation. That night, I realized something important. Love doesn't always need to come with fireworks. Sometimes it's just peace, the kind that doesn't demand, doesn't hurt, doesn't confuse. Emma and I started seeing each other slowly. No rush, no expectations. She knew about my past, and she never asked for more than I could give. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to prove anything. Not to her, not to myself. Almost a year after the divorce, I got an email from Laura. The subject line said, "Closure." It was long, pages of reflection, regret, and apologies. She wrote that she'd been in therapy, that she finally understood what she'd lost. She said she'd realized her moment of weakness had been about chasing youth, not love. Then she wrote this. "I thought I was making a brave choice by following my heart. I didn't realize my heart was empty until I lost the one person who filled it." I read it twice. Then I deleted it. Not out of anger, but because forgiveness doesn't always mean re-entry. Sometimes it just means letting the past stay where it belongs. A few months later, I saw her by coincidence. I was walking through the city park, and she was sitting on a bench with a notebook in her lap. Her hair was shorter, her clothes simpler. For a second, she looked up and our eyes met. There was no drama. No tears. No awkward attempt at conversation. Just a silent acknowledgement. Two people who once shared everything, now strangers with shared history. She gave a faint smile. I nodded. That was enough. As I walked away, I realized something. The peace I'd found wasn't revenge or victory. It was acceptance. Acceptance that not every story ends with reconciliation. That sometimes, people don't ruin your life, they just remove themselves from the version of it that wasn't meant to last. I tell people now, quietly, without bitterness, that love doesn't fail. People do. Love is constant, steady, capable of surviving almost anything. But it can't survive lies. It can't survive someone who looks at you and still sees the shadow of another person in their heart. Laura wasn't evil. She was human, flawed, emotional, uncertain. But sometimes, that's all it takes to destroy something good. And me? I didn't come out of it broken. I came out clear. I learned that boundaries aren't cruelty, silence isn't weakness, and walking away isn't losing, it's reclaiming your peace. Now, when I wake up, I make my coffee in silence and sit by the window watching the sunrise. No tension. No second guessing. No explaining myself to someone who never really listened. And when people ask if I miss her, I smile. Because I don't. I miss the man I was when I still believed she loved me, the one who thought love was enough to fix anything. But that man is gone. In his place is someone stronger, quieter, and wiser, someone who learned that the best revenge isn't making them regret losing you. It's never needing them back. She said she wanted to follow her heart. So I let her. And while she chased her past, I built my peace, one quiet morning at a time.